Well, kids, welcome back to week 2 of Video Sunday School. I am here to tell you another great story from the Bible today about how God works to save and protect his people. Now, just to give you an example from my life, recently we made the decision to move houses, and we'd originally planned on moving in March, maybe even the end of the month. But in the end, we decided to move in January. Found the house we wanted and everything fell in place. Seemed the thing to do. God was behind it, we felt, and so there we moved. And now today, we're very happy that we made that decision. God put us in a place to be able to our kids to come home from college and have plenty of space for them and be done with the move instead of trying to do that all at this rather hectic time. So God is always making things work for us at times. And today's story is going to be at a time when God, acting through people and other events, made things happen so that God's people were saved. Now, this is the story of Esther, and it's actually in the book of Esther in the Bible. Now, it shows how God worked through Esther and several other people to unfold a plan to save his people. But one of the most interesting parts of this book is how many times God is mentioned in it. Do you know? Well, God is actually never mentioned in the book. It's pretty wild, huh? But you can see God's hand in all the events that took place. Now, this story takes place after the fall of Jerusalem. The Jewish people were living in captivity in Persia. So at that time, Persia was ruled by a king whose name was Xerxes. He was a powerful king who ruled an empire stretching from India to Africa. He's also known for his failed attempt to invade Greece. He was one of the most powerful men in the world. So, in the 3rd year of his reign, he was so happy at the wealth of his kingdom that he decided to throw a big party. Now, how many of you have been to a party? All of you have, haven't you? Well, Xerxes' party was going to be for 180 days. Imagine that, a birthday party that lasted a half a year. That was going to be one big party. So, in those days, men and women wouldn't go to the same parties, so the Queen Vashti was throwing a party for the women. As the party went on, Xerxes decided he'd like her to come over and join his party and see him for a bit. And she refused. Now, Xerxes consulted with his wise men who were all there at the party with him. And they came up with a plan. They decided that since the queen showed such disobedience, he needed to get rid of her as queen and find a queen who would obey him. So that's what he did. Vashti was out, and he opened up a search for a new queen. He sent out that all the eligible women in the kingdom come to the palace, to his palace, and he would pick the one that he wanted to be his new queen. So women from all over the empire came to his palace. And one of the women was Esther. Now, her uncle Mordecai had raised her. He was an official in the palace, and he kind of kept secret that he was Jewish because they were one of the captured people. He didn't really let that out. So he told her, I'm going to put you in this contest to be the new queen, but don't tell anyone you're Jewish, because we don't want any problems from that. So she entered it, and she was chosen, selected to be one of the finalists. So see how God put Esther in a position to become queen? Now, when Xerxes got time to spend with Esther, he fell in love with her and chose her to be his queen. Then Mordecai, who was an official of some authority, was judging people's disputes. And one day he heard two of the other officials plotting against Xerxes. He quickly sent word to Esther, who let her husband, the king, know. The king investigated and found the charges to be true. So Xerxes was saved and the two officials were punished. So you see how God made Esther grow in the eyes of Xerxes. Then Mordecai, who had provided the information that saved Xerxes, but another man, Haman, was promoted into the position held by one of the men that had plotted against the king. Haman was a proud man and wanted people to bow down to him because he was such an important figure. Most complied, but not Mordecai, because he knew Haman was an enemy of the Jewish people, and he wouldn't bow to him. This made Haman very angry, and he started to investigate Mordecai, and he found out that Mordecai was Jewish. So he decided that rather than just get Mordecai, he would destroy all the Jews. He was going to destroy God's people. Now, Haman waited for a long time till the king was in the right frame of mind. And then he approached him. Now, Haman knew that the Jewish people kept laws that were from God, and that there were things that they wouldn't do that were not against the law of Persia, just different. Wasn't a bad thing, so he had to make a lie out of it. So Haman went to Xerxes and said that he had found one of the captives' people that wouldn't follow the laws of Xerxes. That these people were not loyal, and the only solution was allow him, to have them all killed. He also promised the king a huge pile of gold coins if he let him do this. Sadly, the king believed his lie and gave Haman one of his rings as a symbol of his authority so that he could carry out his plan. He also probably wanted all that gold. Now, Haman needed to tell a lot of people about his plan, and this was before email or even phones. He had to send letters. So thousands of letters were written by hand. They all told the king's subjects that on a specific day, they were to round up and kill any Jewish people living in their town. One of these letters went to every town in the kingdom. Now, when Mordecai heard of this, he was very sad. He went and sat outside Xerxes' palace and cried. Now, Esther's servant saw Mordecai, her uncle, crying and told her about it. She sent for him. Once he told her about Haman's plan, she understood his tears. Mordecai asked her to go tell the king. She said, "I wish I could, but you can't just go tell Xerxes something. Even just going to approach him, if he doesn't want you there, he could have you killed." Oh, it was a terrible thing, and they took a long time, but finally they decided that it was worth the risk. So, you see how God has acted so many years before to have Esther in this place at this time to make this bold step to save God's people? Now, Esther had a plan. First, she chose to fast and pray for 3 days. And she sent word out and asked all God's people in the capital city to do the same. Then on the 3rd day, she dressed in her royal robe and went and stood in the king's court, not knowing what would happen. Well, the king saw her, and he was happy to see her. He called her to him. He asked Esther what she wanted. She said she wanted he and Haman to come to her palace for a feast that very evening. The king happily agreed. That night, the king and Haman ate magnificently. He offered her anything she wished, it was so good. Esther asked them to come dine with her again tomorrow, and she would then ask for the promised favor. Now, Haman thought he was in great position here. He was so impressed with his getting to dine with the king and queen, not once, but now twice, he rushed home and told his family. Now, although he thought he was in a great position, he still wasn't happy, because he had seen Mordecai working in his office, and he just hated the fact he was still alive and still able to work as one of the king's officers. His wife suggested he go ahead and build the gallows he'd hang Mordecai and the other Jews from in just a few days when his plan was put in place. Now, Haman thought that was a great idea, so he built the gallows. Now, the king that night had a troubled sleep. So he had one of his servants go and get the book that recorded all the great deeds his officers had done. And he wanted them to read them to him, hoping that might help him get to sleep. But instead, there was a story that stuck out to him. It was the story of Mordecai uncovering the plot. He had no idea that Mordecai was his wife's uncle, and he asked, "What honors did this man receive?" And his servant said, "None, sir." Now the king asked, who of my ministers is here? And they told him, "Haman has just arrived." And he called Haman, and he asked him, "Haman, what honor should a man who had done great service for the king be granted?" Now Haman, thinking he was the man who was going to be honored, gave the thing he would like the most. "Why, king, such a man would be most honored to be placed on your favorite horse, dressed in your favorite robes, and paraded around the city so that everybody could honor him for his service to you." And the king said, "Haman, that's a really great choice. I want you to get my horse. I want you to get my best robe. Then I want you to go find Mordecai, my officer, and have him sit on that horse in that robe, and you take him around town and show him to everybody so they can honor him." Now, very shocked and disappointed Haman went and found the man he hated. He put him on the horse and he dressed him in the robes, and he had a miserable day leading him around town. Now, when he was done, he hurried home and told his wife and friends all the terrible things that had happened. But he was still happy because he was going to dine with the king and queen again tonight, and then tomorrow Mordecai would join the other Jews in the city on the gallows he had built. So Haman went to the feast and again enjoyed a magnificent meal. Then finally the time came for the queen to ask her favor. Esther then spoke up and said, "King, if I have seen any favor in your eyes, please save me and my people. For one of your officers has sent out an order that tomorrow all we Jews are to be killed." And the king asked, "Who is this scoundrel?" And the queen then pointed across the table and said, "This wicked Haman." Now, God had put Esther in a place where she could save God's people. Haman and his family and friends wound up on the gallows they had built to put the Jews on. Esther remained queen. Mordecai was promoted to take Haman's place in the king's council, and letters were quickly sent to stop Haman's orders to all the cities of the kingdom. God uses people at everyday events to work out his plan. He has a plan for each of us, and he will take care of us. You guys have a good week.